The sun had long set on the alien planet of Karna. In the vast, star-filled sky, the two moons rose high, casting a pale light over the jagged mountains. It was a quiet night, the kind where the only sounds were the distant howls of the wind, the rustling of the trees, and the occasional chirp of alien insects. Yet in the heart of a high-tech fortress built into the mountainside, a different kind of silence filled the air. Inside one of the deepest, most secure cells, Princess Kirana sat on the cold stone floor, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hands were bound by a thick chain and her heart beat wildly in her chest. She had known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier to face. The humans, the invaders from the stars, had breached her planet's defenses. They had come with ships of metal and fire, weapons that could destroy entire cities in the blink of an eye. Her people, the Karani, had always been peaceful, relying on their advanced knowledge of science and diplomacy. But against the might of human technology, they were helpless. Kirana had been captured during the final moments of the battle, her body bruised and tired from trying to fight, but her spirit still burned with the fire of her ancestors. The humans had come for her not because they needed her. No, it wasn't like that. She was their prize, the most valuable asset of the Karani. The tradition of her people dictated that when a Karani princess was taken by an enemy, it was customary for the invader to consume her. It was not something she fully understood, but it was a part of her people's strange customs. The thought of it filled her with dread. Closing her eyes tightly, Kirana forced herself to block out the fear. She would die with dignity. That was the only thing she could do now. She had no other choice. The door to her cell suddenly creaked open and Kirana's breath caught in her throat. The heavy boots of a human soldier echoed down the cold hallway, growing louder with each step. She didn't dare look up. She had heard about this part of the ritual. She knew what would happen next. The soldier would step into her cell, towering over her with his sharp, threatening gaze. He would order her to stand, and when she did, the ritual would begin. She would be consumed by him, and that would be the end. There would be no more pain, no more fear, only silence. The sound of the boot stopped just in front of her. Kirana stiffened, bracing herself for what was to come. But what happened next was not what she had imagined. The human soldier didn't speak at first. For a long moment he simply stood there, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely calm. Kirana dared not look up at him, but she could feel his gaze on her. It was different from the cold, distant stares of the other soldiers who had captured her. There was something more in his eyes, curiosity, maybe even sympathy. "Are you just going to sit there?" The soldier finally spoke, his voice deep but soft, unlike the harsh tones she had heard from his comrades. "You know, it's not going to change anything." Kirana's heart skipped a beat. The humans had been taught to show no mercy, no compassion. She had seen enough of their brutality in the past few days to understand their cruelty. But this soldier, he spoke with an almost human touch. What was going on? She didn't answer him. There was no point. The tradition had already been set in motion and she would follow through with it. She had to. This was her destiny, her fate. The soldier didn't move at first, but then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee. He was closer now, just a few feet away. Kirana could hear him taking slow, measured breaths, and his hand, covered in armored gloves, reached down to gently touch her face. She flinched, but the touch was surprisingly tender. "I'm not going to hurt you," the soldier said, his voice a little quieter now. "You don't need to be afraid." Kirana's confusion only deepened. This couldn't be right. She had been taught that the humans were nothing but monsters, driven by violence and hunger. She had been told to expect the worst. And yet, here this soldier was kneeling before her with an almost respectful demeanor. For the first time since her capture, she looked up at him. His face was hard to read, a mixture of strength and kindness. His eyes were a deep shade of brown, warm yet distant, as though he had seen too much of the world's cruelty. His face was clean-shaven, with sharp features, and his hair was short and dark. He didn't look like a typical soldier. He didn't have the cold, detached demeanor of the others. Kirana opened her mouth, unsure of what to say. She had heard about the strength of humans, but she had never imagined they could show such vulnerability. "I'm not your enemy," the soldier continued, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm here to protect you." Kirana blinked, trying to process his words. Protect her? From what? She had already been captured. She was already at their mercy. There was nothing left to protect. Before she could respond, the soldier spoke again. "Listen to me," he said, his tone now more serious. "I don't know what your people have been told about us, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to do what you think. I'm here to stop this war." The words didn't make sense to Kirana. Stop the war? What was he talking about? Her people had been fighting for months. Her own planet was on the brink of destruction. How could this soldier, this one human, think he could stop all of that? "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this? You have won. You have me. You can do whatever you want." The soldier's eyes softened. "Because I've seen enough. I've lost too much, and I don't want to be a part of that anymore." Kirana stared at him, completely confused. She had no idea what he meant by that. But somehow she felt something stir inside her, a small spark of hope. "Are you going to eat me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The soldier shook his head, his expression full of sadness. "No," he said softly. "That's not why I'm here." Kirana had heard so many stories about the humans, about the horrors they were capable of. She had never expected kindness from them, especially not from someone who had captured her. Yet, as she looked into his eyes, she began to wonder if there was more to this situation than she had been led to believe. For the first time, Kirana felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this human soldier could show her that not all humans were the monsters her people had feared. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. A way for both of them to survive. The cold stone walls of Kirana's cell seemed to close in around her as she sat on the hard floor, staring at the human soldier before her. She had been prepared for the worst, yet here he was, sitting across from her, his posture relaxed, not a hint of menace in his demeanor. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The story she had been told about the humans, about their cruel ways, didn't fit with the reality she was facing now. She couldn't quite understand why he wasn't following through with what was expected. Her people had always been taught that when they were captured, they would be consumed as a mark of their defeat. It was a grim tradition that had been passed down for generations. Yet the human before her wasn't looking at her with hunger, but with something else, something different. As she watched him, she noticed the soft lines of exhaustion around his eyes. The soldier, with his tough exterior and uniform, wasn't the picture of a ruthless invader. His eyes were tired, like someone who had seen too much. His movements were careful and deliberate, as if he didn't want to make her feel threatened. "You're not like the others," Kirana said quietly, breaking the silence that had hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. The soldier raised an eyebrow, tilting his head slightly. "How so?" "You're not acting like an invader," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "You're not here to consume me." The words felt strange to say out loud, but they were the truth. She had expected violence, but all she had encountered from him was calmness. He sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world rested upon them. "I'm not like the others," he said softly. "I know. But maybe that's because I never wanted to be like them." Kirana's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" The soldier hesitated for a moment, as though considering whether to share more of himself with her. He seemed like a man who had lived through things he didn't want to talk about. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low but firm. "I didn't come here to kill or hurt anyone. I came because my mission was to stop a war that's been going on for too long. A war that's been fought for the wrong reasons." Kirana's heart skipped a beat. "You came to stop the war?" she asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "But your people are the ones who started it. You're the invaders." The soldier shook his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. It's not that simple. The war didn't start because we wanted it. My people, they were tricked. A group of powerful leaders on Earth, they wanted control. They thought they could take what they wanted from your people, and the war would be justified. But not everyone believed in that. Not me. Kirana felt a wave of emotion rush over her, a mixture of confusion, anger, and curiosity. How could she trust him? How could she believe a word he was saying? Yet she couldn't deny that there was something different about him. His eyes weren't full of hatred. They were full of something else. Sorrow? Regret? Kirana wasn't. Sure, you expect me to believe you? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. After Eve. Kirana walked beside the human soldier, Jack Carson, through the dark corridors of the fortress. The air was thick with the scent of dust and metal, a sharp contrast to the warm breeze that she was used to on her home planet. Despite the strange surroundings, there was a new sense of hope blooming in her chest. For the first time since her capture, she wasn't just waiting for the worst to happen. She wasn't waiting to die. She wasn't alone anymore. Jack led her through a series of narrow hallways and staircases, each one dimly lit by flickering lights that cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. His movements were quick, but precise, and Kirana couldn't help but notice the way he seemed to navigate the fortress like someone who had been here before. He wasn't just an ordinary soldier. He was something more, someone who had seen the worst of what this war had to offer. She could sense that. What is this place? Kirana asked, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was soft, cautious. She wasn't entirely sure if she should be asking too many questions, but her curiosity got the better of her. Jack glanced at her, his expression serious. This is the heart of the enemy's operation. Their command center. We're not safe here for long, but it's the best chance we have to get away before they realize I'm not coming back. Kirana felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had been taught that the humans were ruthless and efficient, that their strategies were always about overpowering and taking what they wanted. The fact that Jack was working against his own people, against the ones who had captured her, was both unsettling and oddly reassuring. It made her question everything she had ever believed about the humans and their motivations. I don't understand, Kirana said, her voice barely a whisper. If you're not like the others, why are you helping me? Why not just leave me here and let your people take me? Jack didn't answer right away. He stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. His eyes were full of a quiet sadness, something that Kirana had seen in the eyes of her own people during the war. She didn't say anything, just waited for him to explain. I was once like them, Jack began, his voice low and steady. I followed orders without question. I believed in the cause. I thought we were doing the right thing, but I was wrong. Everything I was told, everything I thought I knew, was a lie. The war, the destruction, it wasn't about saving anyone. It was about control. Kirana's heart raced as she listened to his words. A part of her didn't want to believe him. She had always been taught that the humans were invaders, that they were driven by greed and power. But Jack's words felt different. They didn't sound like lies. They sounded like the truth. I don't understand, Kirana repeated, her voice more urgent now. If this war is about control, why did you come for me? Why are you protecting me? Jack's expression softened, his eyes filled with the weight of regret. Because I can't stand by and watch more innocent lives be destroyed. Your people didn't deserve this. I'm sorry for what my people have done to you, to your planet. I should have stopped it sooner. But now I have a chance to make things right, and I'm not going to waste it. Kirana stood still for a moment, absorbing his words. She had always believed that the humans were merciless, that they were only interested in conquest and power. But the sincerity in Jack's voice, the way he seemed to carry the burden of the war on his shoulders, made her question everything. Could it be true? Could there be humans who were fighting for peace instead of destruction? She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But the fear of being betrayed, of falling for another lie, kept her guarded. You said you were once like them, Kirana said, her voice trembling. What changed? Jack exhaled slowly, his eyes darkening as if the question had stirred up memories he wasn't ready to relive. I saw too much. I lost too much. I watched as people I cared about were sacrificed for the sake of a cause that wasn't even theirs. When I finally realized what was happening, it was too late. The damage had already been done. And now, I can't undo the past, but I can make sure the future is different. Kirana's heart clenched at his words. She could hear the pain in his voice, the guilt that weighed him down. It was something she knew all too well. Her own people had suffered for so long, caught in the middle of a war they didn't want. She had always thought that if they just held on long enough, they could survive. But now, as she listened to Jack, she wondered if there was another way. Could they all find a way to survive together without the bloodshed? Could they find peace? Why are you telling me all of this? Kirana asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jack turned away, walking again, and Kirana followed him, trying to keep up with his long strides. Because you need to know the truth. You need to understand that I'm not your enemy. I never was. Kirana felt a flicker of something inside her, a small, hopeful spark. She wasn't sure where it came from, or if it was even possible, but the thought of peace, real peace, was something she had never dared to hope for. Could Jack be the key to ending the war? Could they both somehow stop the bloodshed that had torn her world apart? They reached a large steel door at the end of the corridor, and Jack pressed a hidden panel on the wall, causing the door to slide open. The sound of machinery whirring to life echoed through the space, but it didn't take long before they were inside a small, dimly lit room. It was filled with screens and equipment that Kirana didn't recognize, but she could tell from Jack's movements that he was at home here. He went to one of the consoles and began typing quickly, his fingers moving over the keys with practiced ease. Kirana watched him in silence, trying to make sense of what was happening. What was Jack doing? What was his plan? Jack glanced up at her, his face serious. I'm contacting the people who can help us. We need to get you out of here before the rest of the soldiers realize we're missing. Who are these people? Kirana asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. They're the ones who can end this war, Jack replied. They're the ones who can help us bring the truth to light. We just need to reach them before it's too late. Kirana's mind was racing. The idea of reaching out to someone who could end the war was tempting, but it also filled her with uncertainty. Could she really trust Jack? Could she trust anyone in this world of lies and deceit? But as she looked at him, as she saw the determination in his eyes and the sincerity in his words, something inside her began to shift. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for peace. A chance to stop the endless violence that had scarred her people for so long. I want to believe you, Kirana said quietly, but I need to know more. I need to know how we can stop this war, how we can make things right. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you. Together we can stop the destruction. Together we can end the war. Kirana nodded, her resolve growing stronger. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like there was hope. A hope that had seemed so far out of reach. As Jack continued to work at the console, Kirana stood beside him, silently watching. Her mind was still full of questions, but there was one thing she knew for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. She had someone on her side. And together, they would fight for a future where peace was possible. Kirana stood beside Jack in the dimly lit room, watching as his fingers flew over the control panel. The sound of the keys tapping echoed through the room, the only noise in the otherwise quiet fortress. For a moment, Kirana allowed herself to relax, feeling a small sense of comfort in Jack's presence. She could feel the tension easing from her shoulders, a feeling she hadn't experienced in days. It was hard to explain, but something about Jack made her believe in the possibility of a future without war. He had risked his life to rescue her, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to stop the destruction. In a world that had been consumed by chaos, Jack was a small flicker of hope, and Kirana wasn't sure what to make of it yet, but she was willing to give him a chance. "Do you really think we can get out of here?" Kirana asked, her voice breaking the silence between them. Jack didn't look up from the control panel. His brow furrowed in concentration as he navigated through the fortress's security system. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "If we don't get out of here soon, the whole fortress will be on high alert. We'll be caught before we even get a chance to reach the extraction point." Kirana's heart raced at the thought of being caught. She had never been in such a dangerous situation before. The Karani had always been peaceful, relying on their knowledge and diplomacy to navigate the world around them. But now, faced with the reality of war and betrayal, Kirana had to learn quickly how to survive. "I trust you," Kirana said, her voice steady, though her heart was still pounding. "I just don't know what to expect. I've never been in a situation like this. How do we get out?" Jack turned to her, his expression serious but reassuring. "First, we need to get past the outer perimeter of this facility. That's the easy part. Then we'll move through the tunnels beneath the fortress, out to the open fields where my team will meet us. The hard part will be getting to the tunnels without being detected." Kirana nodded, trying to stay focused. She had been trained in many things, but survival in an enemy base was not one of them. Still, there was no turning back. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the narrow tunnels. Kirana could feel her heart pounding in her chest, every beat feeling like it was rattling through her entire body. She glanced over at Jack, who was moving ahead with a sense of urgency in his steps. His expression was set, determined, but Kirana couldn't shake the sense of dread building within her. She had thought they were close to freedom. They had made it so far, down the narrow passageways, through the dimly lit hallways and into the hidden underground control rooms. But now, as they approached the exit point, she felt a tightening in her chest, as though something wasn't quite right. She had been betrayed before, and the thought of it happening again filled her with unease. "Stay focused," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're almost there." Kirana nodded, though the anxiety gnawing at her insides wouldn't let go. She couldn't explain it, but something was off. The air felt different now, heavier, more oppressive. They moved quickly, following the narrow passage toward the exit marked on the map Jack had shown her earlier. It was supposed to be their escape, their route to freedom, but as they rounded the final corner, the scene before them shattered her fragile sense of hope. The exit was sealed shut. A group of soldiers stood in front of it, blocking their way. At the center of the group was a familiar face, the face of one of Kirana's own advisors, Zarek. His sharp features and cold eyes had always made her uneasy. She had trusted him once, but now, as he stood there, smirking in front of the sealed exit, Kirana felt a cold rush of realization wash over her. "Zarek," she whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. Jack's hand immediately went to his sidearm, his body tense with readiness. But Kirana saw the look in his eyes, the same kind of expression she had seen in his face before, the one that showed his readiness for anything, the one that told her this was going to be a fight. "Not quite as fast as you thought, Princess," Zarek said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "You really thought you could escape so easily?" Kirana's blood ran cold. Betrayal. She had suspected something was wrong, but she hadn't expected this. She had trusted Zarek, trusted him to help her in her fight for peace. Yet here he was, standing in her way, blocking her escape with a look of utter contempt on his face. "Why?" Kirana demanded, stepping forward. Her voice wavered, but she tried to hold on to her strength. "Why would you do this? You were supposed to be on our side. You were supposed to help me." Zarek's lips curled into a sneer. "Help you? You really think I would side with a weak, helpless princess who can't even save her own people? I'm not here to help you, Kirana. I'm here to end this farce. The humans should never have come here. Your people should have known better than to trust them." Jack's hand tightened around his weapon. "You're the one who's been working with the enemy. he said, his voice low and threatening. "You're the one who's been betraying your people. I should have known something was off." Zarek's smile widened, his eyes glinting with malice. "Of course, but you weren't supposed to know. I've been playing my part just like everyone else. The humans never stood a chance. You two? You're just pawns in a bigger game." Kirana could hardly believe her ears. Zarek, the one person she thought she could trust, had been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. He had been the traitor, the one who had sold out her people, the one who had given up their future for power and control. She had been fooled, and now they were trapped. Her mind raced. There had to be a way out. There had to be a plan B. Jack looked at her, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. He wasn't going to let Zarek get away with this. Neither was Kirana. This wasn't the end. She wouldn't let it be. "I won't let you do this," Kirana said, her voice stronger now, a fire igniting within her. "You won't get away with this betrayal." Zarek raised his hand, signaling for his soldiers to move forward. "I don't think you have a choice, Princess." The soldiers stepped closer, surrounding them. Kirana could feel her heart racing, her thoughts spinning. They were outnumbered, but she wasn't about to let Zarek win. Not now. Not when she was so close to ending this nightmare. Without thinking, she lunged at Zarek, her fists clenched. She wasn't going to stand by and let him destroy everything her people had fought for. Jack's voice cut through the air, warning her to stop, but it was too late. Kirana had already made her move. Zarek caught her by the wrist, easily overpowering her. He twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her to the ground with a swift motion. She gasped in pain, but her mind remained sharp. She wasn't going to let him break her. She had to fight. She had to survive. Jack was quick to react. He fired a warning shot into the air, causing the soldiers to pause, their eyes shifting toward him. "Get back!" he shouted, his voice booming in the enclosed space. "I don't want to have to kill anyone." Zarek's laughter echoed through the corridor, cold and harsh. "You really think you can stop this now, soldier? You're already too late." Kirana's heart sank as she realized the full extent of the situation. Zarek had planned this. He had been waiting for the right moment to trap them. The soldiers surrounding them weren't just there to stop them. They were there to make sure they never left the fortress alive. But there was still a chance. As Zarek gloated, Kirana twisted her body, using the momentum to break free from his grip. She elbowed him in the stomach, sending him staggering back. For a brief moment, she felt a surge of triumph, but it was quickly replaced by a cold dread. The soldiers were still there. Zarek was still in control. "We don't have time for this," Jack said, his voice sharp. "We need to get out of here now." Kirana nodded, realizing he was right. They couldn't fight all of them. They needed to move. But how? The plan they had relied on was falling apart. Their only chance was to take Zarek out of the equation. She glanced at Jack, hoping for some sign that he had a plan. Jack didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, drawing his weapon and aiming it at the soldiers. "Drop your weapons," he commanded. "This is your last warning." Zarek's face twisted in anger. "You think you can intimidate me, human? I've already won." But Jack wasn't trying to intimidate him. He was buying time. He fired a shot at the ceiling, causing the soldiers to scatter. That's when Kirana saw it. A weak spot in the wall, a small opening they could use to escape. "Move!" Kirana shouted, grabbing Jack's arm and pulling him toward the opening. They had only seconds before the soldiers recovered. They couldn't waste any more time. Jack followed her, his weapon still raised, ready to protect her. They made it. Through the opening, the sound of the soldiers' footsteps ringing in their ears. But Kirana didn't look back. They had to keep moving. They had to keep fighting. The world outside was dark, but the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever before. The battle wasn't over. There was still hope. As long as they didn't give up, Kirana and Jack ran through the darkness, their breaths heavy and labored, but neither of them slowed down. The fortress was behind them now, but the danger hadn't passed. Every step they took felt like a step further away from the life Kirana had known. A life that had been shattered by betrayal, by war, and by the actions of those she once trusted. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something stirring within her, a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. They had made it outside. The night sky stretched out above them, the two moons glowing faintly in the distance. The cold air filled Kirana's lungs, sharp and refreshing, as she took in her surroundings. The world felt so vast, so full of possibility, and for the first time it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning. "We're not safe yet," Jack said, his voice cutting through the silence. He was moving ahead, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. "We need to get to the extraction point. My team should be waiting for us there." Kirana nodded, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. Her thoughts raced, her mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded in the fortress. Zarek, the man she had once trusted, had betrayed her. His smile had been the last thing she'd seen before the chaos erupted. But now, as she ran alongside Jack, Kirana knew that betrayal didn't define her. She wasn't going to let it. They moved quickly through the dense forest, their steps light and swift, but every rustling leaf made Kirana's heart race. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. But Jack was a step ahead, always looking, always listening. He had been trained for this. He had been trained to survive in a world filled with danger. As they approached a small clearing, Jack stopped abruptly, raising his hand to signal for Kirana to stop. She halted just in time, her breath coming in short gasps as she looked at him, her body tense with anticipation. "Do you hear that?" Jack whispered. Kirana listened carefully. The sounds of the forest were soothing, the chirp of distant insects, the rustle of leaves in the wind. But there was something else. Something faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. The sound was soft at first, but growing louder. Jack's grip tightened on his weapon, and Kirana instinctively reached for hers. They were being hunted. The soldiers from the fortress had found them. Jack's eyes locked onto hers, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to act fast. "We need to move," Jack said, his voice low but urgent. "We can't let them catch us." Without waiting for a response, Jack led the way, darting through